Well, let's get into it right now, shall we? 5G is the hot topic in tech these days. It's becoming more pervasive, as we know now, and certainly will be even more so in coming years. Most sectors of the economy can become digital to the core with 5G technology. How will we transform the financial services, accelerate under the technology improvements driven by 5G? Julia Chatterley of CNN talks to Vinod Kumar, the Chief Executive Officer of Vodafone Business, to get his thoughts on this. We start our America's Zone coverage today with Julia and Vinod as we seek to understand the progress 5G networks will have on financial services. Julia, over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and Vinod, great to be with you. I think we have to take a step back first because technology's played such a pivotal role in our lives this year, keeping us connected, allowing us to pay for things, to order food, to shop online in particular. I feel like this conversation, had we had it 9 months ago, would be incredibly different. Just set the scene for us. Where are we today? And then we'll push forward.
Hi, Julia. Firstly, you're absolutely right. If you look at the role technology has played ever since COVID broke out. I speak to businesses all shapes and sizes all over the world. None of us imagined the profound impact it would have on the way we do business, and even forcing us to fundamentally rethink our business models. And whether it is the use of digital payments in the FinTech conference, mobile wallets, just going through the roof, and even amongst audiences that typically were very reluctant before COVID to use these, and largely because we've had no choice. And so simple things like we spoke about on contactless payments, everybody is using it now, even those who had no idea it existed before COVID. Some of the largest companies in the world have deployed digital services to interact with their customers in areas that they were planning to do in a couple of years, but COVID's forced all of us to fast track those plans and implement them right now.
Yeah, I think the CEO of Microsoft said to me, we've done 5 to 10 years worth of digitization and technology acceleration in the space of 9 months. Let's hone into what you were saying there about what we've seen in payments and financial services space, because like it or not, we've had to get used to it and really quickly. What does layering on top of this, the impact of 5G technology and broader adoption of this mean to the acceleration that we've already seen?
In terms of payments itself, I think 5G will, help faster processing of payments, but it's more broad than that. 5G essentially higher speed, much lower latency, so the response time will be considerably lower than what we experience today using 4G networks, but also allow a larger number of devices to run on the same network. When you bring all of this together to a payments world, it basically means there will be a lot more capacity on the network available to process payments, not only between humans, but between humans and things. And also one of the things that we are working on is things-to-things payments that happen almost automatically. For example, you pick up your electric car to a charging station. You should not be required to take your wallet out and take your credit card and go contactless. The car and the charging station should recognize each other in a payment process. There'll be billions, tens of billions of transactions which will become possible because of the power of 5G.
I think your point about latency is also a really important one, because we're still trying to decide for many of us whether there are things that we'd like to go into branch to do just to speak to somebody and have that touch versus doing it online. 5G technology surely allows, just given the speed and the connectivity that we can get, to blend the two of those things. So you can speak to somebody virtually through extended reality, for example, or virtual reality. It's a blending of the two things that we, as customers and consumers, perhaps find most comfortable.
Absolutely. I think, when I look at 5G, 5G is the network technology that will deliver connectivity up to 10 times faster than 4G. But 5G also then combined with things like edge computing, that puts high performance computing closer to the user, creates new possibilities. And then you layer on something like augmented reality, virtual reality, or now what we talk about is mixed reality. So when you bring these three things together and you apply to the financial world, the ground of future will look completely different, right? The branch of the future, firstly, will be a movable branch. You may not need physical assets. Companies can figure out where they need to move their activity to, and the branch can move there. That's going to become much easier because they know wires that you have to lug around. The second thing is use of technologies like AR, VR, to help those who are in the branch and out, away from the branch, to work in an immersive experience and feel like they're together in one place. And finally, if you may be in the branch and you want to visualize your asset model, or you want to visualize where the market is going, those kind of things will become much more democratized because of 5G than we currently have.
Because I know you have just signed a sort of partnership agreement with one of Italy's largest banks. So it's beyond just what the customer experiences and what we as consumers and customers face. To your point, it's about the internals within the financial system as well, transacting trades, things like algorithmic trading where split seconds count. If you can increase that speed, then the efficiency of the bank itself is heightened.
Exactly. I think customer experience is what we largely focus on because it's the external stuff and it's quite glamorous about how you're going to do modeling and immersive banking with your using the AR, VR headset with your private banker, or all the other manifestations which are external. However, the internal working of a bank with 5G technologies will also dramatically improve. For example, you can have more people having access to larger data sets to do their modeling, prediction, and so on, which otherwise you couldn't do earlier. You could now put data into the hands of more people in a secure way, which is really important factor to consider while thinking about banking and thinking about personal data. The other thing is in terms of the ability for people within an organization to move very freely and not be tethered to their desk, again, is a possibility, which is going to be important in this new way of working that we'll all go into when we go back to work. So it's very much about productivity, efficiency, new way of working, as much as it is about external customer experience.
Yeah, leveraged by a global workforce, perhaps of the future, working wherever you want to be in the world. When I hear somebody say more people having access to data, though, and faster processing speeds, and in an era of the Internet of Things, my ears immediately prick up, and I think data security, because this also surely is at the heart of the way that we need to be thinking about and preparing for a 5G future and more wide acceptance and adoption of 5G technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are two sides to this coin, right? Because 5G is going to allow a lot more data to be processed, and therefore it can be used to triangulate potential frauds. So you'll be able to scan the entire threat horizon and detect frauds before they happen because you have networks transmitting data faster. You have edge computing or potentially in the near future quantum computing. So the good thing is we can actually detect frauds proactively and before they really strike us and cause any. The flip side of that is obviously there's a lot more data that's traversing through the pipes and data moving around. When I say pipes, I mean wireless. Therefore, we need to be very vigilant, and both the providers such as ourselves and the banks in this case as the customers have an extra sense of duty and responsibility to make sure that the safeguards are in place. So there's a lot of consideration factors at the design stage of the products to make sure these breaches don't occur.
I guess one of the benefits, though, too, is if you find a breach or you find vulnerabilities, you can update and you can address those in real time, simultaneously, perhaps while people are still working, rather than needing some downtime to fix them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also the response time, as you said, will improve with 5G.
Talk to me about some of the limitations here, too, because I think what's become very clear is I've looked around the world, certainly with the conversations that I've been having, though some people have benefited from being able to work from home and have benefited from the technology, areas that have a lack of broadband access, rural communities can't get access to education very easily, have suffered. So we've seen this digital divide widen. What's the risk that as we see continued adoption of 5G technology, that digital divide that we've seen widen this year actually is further widened over the coming months and years?
It's a very good point. something that we at Vodafone are really mindful of and doing quite a bit in the markets that we operate, to even offer free services to disadvantaged students, for example, or elderly citizens who don't have the access to the technology, or some cases can't afford it. So it's important that we keep a very close eye on that, and it's something that we all have to do. No one operator can do it. But the way I look at it though is 5G, a big consideration is rural communities and the speed at which networks can roll out. In the traditional way of looking at networking, where the higher speeds came, where the reliability came with fixed connectivity, fiber rollouts and rollout. It's a physical task which takes more time than it is to roll out a wireless network. There's costs associated with both, which we can't ignore. But with 5G, I actually believe that the digital divide, especially in rural areas, can be reduced because we can get faster and we can get fixed infrastructure into those communities. But operators need to work with regulators and often work together to make sure that the coverage is provided in the rural communities. So what we're finding, Julia, is not just about the network connectivity, it's also the other things that go along with it. Everything from the access to that kind of computer power, we talk about connectivity, making sure it's available to them. It's about skills training. It is about device availability. So when we think of digital divide, we need to think about the whole package or an institution.
Yeah, because this is not also just down to mobile operators or indeed down to the banks. I mean, there's financial inclusion benefits of being able to get online internet access, banking capabilities for rural communities that perhaps don't have near access to a bank branch too. What role should regulators be playing? Because you kind of raised the point here, we may be getting 10 times the speeds. We as consumers aren't going to pay 10 times the price for the internet access and the capabilities that we have. So how does this work in practice to ensure that those hard to reach places are accessed?
So, we would love it if you pay 10 times the price, but that may not happen. It's really about, I think, two things. It's about infrastructure sharing. So the operators come together to build infrastructure, especially in rural areas. We've done that very successfully here in the UK, but in other markets also it's possible, and we're working on it. We come together and build common infrastructure so we can get services rolled out quickly, and then you compete based on service experience, features, and a lot of other capabilities. Having regulators be open to infrastructure sharing is one. Second, the spectrum policy being balanced and being fair, taking into account the importance that telecommunication connectivity plays in the digital society, which in turn is proportionately and directly linked to economic growth, are things that we hold regular discussions with regulators and policymakers across the world.
And we are seeing that sort of collegiate behavior between mobile operators, because we didn't see that so much with the sort of fostering adoption of Internet of Things capabilities. Is there an acceptance within the sector that actually we can't do this alone and we can all benefit actually from working together? There's cost benefits from working together.
Yeah, it's very difficult to give a generic answer that is a global one. But speaking to Europe and parts of Africa where we are very active, I can say that we're seeing more and more signs of that. We are collaborating quite a bit, for example, on the construction of telecom towers and infrastructure. We have that in other countries, including in several markets in Asia. I think those are very good steps towards the industry getting coverage out to lesser populated areas of the population, which individual operators can't always justify building out at the same speed as they would in larger cities.
What about for the banks themselves? Because banks come in all shapes and sizes. Some of the more traditional banks that are at different stages on their journey to digitization and a more digital future as far as customers are concerned are currently being disrupted by digital banks that have the capabilities from the get-go. So how do your conversations differ, and how do you approach perhaps each individual bank rather than geographically, given the regulatory backdrop, to have these conversations about what next and when?
Yeah, I have to say that when it came to adoption of cutting edge technologies, about let's say 7 to 10 years ago, the banks were really cautious and was behind other industries. I would say fast forward to where we are now, Julia. Banks are actually more progressive and adopting new technologies faster than many other sectors. And I think this has happened largely because of the digital challenges that have come up in the banking, financial services, insurance sector. And we did an industry study recently, and from banks, I'll just give this. 68% leaders in the financial industry actually said they find the future. 53% of them said that they expect substantial changes to their business model, and only 32% that the changes that they would have to go through are going to be challenging for them. I was quite surprised by this pleasantly and happily so, because the industry seems to be open to change and also seems to be preparing for change more than some of the other industries that we've seen, which is quite a reversal of the situation from a few years ago. It means two things. One is maturing of the technology. It also means that the threat of the challenges is very real, that the big players are waking up and saying, God, we've got to do something about this. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be an interesting space to watch. And big banks have, big financial institutions, financial services companies have great brands. They have great customer base. They have also excellent compliance and regulatory foundations in place. They will use those in combination with the technology in order to take on the smaller challenges that are coming at them with very creative business models.
There's some fascinating statistics in there, though, specifically the 32%. What do you say to those when they say, look, this is going to have a detrimental impact on the business? Do you say, you've got no choice?
Well, one is I actually would say, don't try to solve everything together, break it down, right, into areas where you see the biggest threat or the biggest opportunity. The other intensely focused on customer experience, right? and make sure that the customer experience is truly digital. There are great aha moments and wow moments in the point of the journey where the customer wants it to be truly digital. And then, partner with your providers, partner with other stakeholders who are trying to address the same customer base, who are trying to defend their business model and create solutions, because just to do it on your own is quite challenging for everyone.
Geographically, and maybe we can't do this, but certainly my sense from traveling is that the banks in Southeast Asia, in China, they sort of skipped an era that we saw in some of the Western nations, where they're far more savvy about things like digital payments, online transactions. The banks there are far more digitized, perhaps, certainly in specific countries. Singapore, for example, I've mentioned China already. Do you see a catch-up going on with some of these, particularly the larger Western banks? And is this important or less so in light of what we've been through in the last 9 months?
If you look at markets, you mentioned Southeast Asia, but I'd also like to refer to Sub-Saharan Africa, where we are very present, where the use of mobile money, digital payments, digital services, related to mobile wallets, is just far out. It's similar to what we have in many of the Southeast Asian economies and in China. And the reason for that is there wasn't a replacement process. It was when you brought people into the financial system, when you were making the unbankable bank, you just went straight to the latest technology. There was no change of customer behavior. There was no rewiring of systems that had to be done by the providers. So that was actually a blessing, in disguise, so to speak, for them. And I would have thought, a year ago that was a bridge that would take some time to cross for Western civilization in the financial space. However, COVID has actually put a gun to our heads, right? Probably two guns to each side. It's a change or else, right? And then people have changed, and and things that they thought they were going to deploy in phases, they rolled out at speed. And on the demand side, the consumers have actually adopted it equally quickly and changed their behaviors. So I think there's still a gap, but I do actually believe that the gap is narrowing, and the open user to bridge the gaps is on the rise.
Yeah, and hopefully people benefit ultimately. Greater financial inclusion, greater access to finance and financial services of all forms. Vinod, I have to wrap up there. As always, 20 minutes goes incredibly quickly, but it was a huge privilege to chat to you. And I just want to thank everybody for listening in and watching our discussion. And guys, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you for that engaging discussion, Vinod Kumar and Julia Chatterley of CNN on the progress 5G networks will have on financial services.